Кредити для бізнесу та менеджер для вас. ProCreditBank. Банк розумних людей.
The fate of Ukraine will be decided in the coming days, as Slovak Prime Minister Fico says. Is Putin really ready to make a deal? Who is ready to talk to the Kremlin dictator on behalf of the West? And what do Americans say about the Ukrainian plan for victory? We will not only talk about this with our guest Boris Pincus, public figure, president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club, on our air. Boris Yakovlevich, hello.
Good afternoon, dear. Glad to be on your channel and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. The likelihood of ending the war in Ukraine in a short time is very high, says Slovak Prime Minister Fico. Quote, I expect that tomorrow it will be possible to hint at something, because suddenly the topic of inviting Ukraine to NATO appears, he said, but Fico believes that this invitation will not be, so to speak, free. Boris Yakovlevich, today, as we know, Zelenskyy presented a victory plan to Ukrainians and society. One of the main points is Ukraine's accession to NATO. In your opinion, what does Robert Fico mean and what do we expect tomorrow?
If we talk about Robert Fico, then it is necessary to emphasize his fame in world politics as a supporter of not helping Ukraine in its expulsion of barbarians abroad in 1991. This is a well-known fact. Moreover, he is not very willing to help Ukraine, even as a member of Rammstein's compact group, which includes 54 countries. Therefore, there is no point in trusting his statements, although I do not rule out that today he is also trying, like one of those who have been raising his voice all this time, to become a peacemaker. The same Erdogan, for example, tried China, and India tried, and there is South Africa, and Brazil, there is just anyone. And here to fight back, you see, I decided to raise my voice, but I think I am already moving on to the plan for the escape of Ukraine, where the first point is NATO membership. Well, what can I tell you, my friends? Two aspects are related to this point, the main point. First, of course, Ukraine has long deserved to be a member of NATO. Not the NATO that exists today, which has two clauses in its charter that do not allow Ukraine to become a member of NATO right now, based on this charter. What are these 2 points? First, a country that is at war cannot be a member of NATO. This is the first point. And the second is 100% voting of all 32 NATO members for a candidate who wants to be a member of NATO. It won't happen, my friends. Of course not. Here is the same Fico. Do you think he will vote for? Of course not. I'm not talking about Orban, and in one corrupt one. These two are enough to forget that Ukraine will be a member of NATO. But I am telling you that NATO, and I have always said it on all airwaves, has long failed to meet the requirements or, more precisely, the challenges that Western civilization is facing today. The most obvious example is that it is Ukraine, the great Ukraine today, that protects NATO members from the barbarians of the 21st century, and not the other way around. After all, Ukraine is not a dictatorial country, a country that has announced its embarkation on the path of independence and democracy. And in 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it has done a lot during this time, with all the shortcomings that Ukraine has today. This, by the way, let's be as objective as possible. Let's forget about my party affiliation. After all, first and foremost, I'm an American and a taxpayer. Therefore, I will try to be extremely objective. It was Trump who, in his first cadence, spoke out against the existing status of NATO as a country that has become decentralized, a country that lives at the expense of the American taxpayer, eats, and does not worry about itself. And the requirement of the NATO Charter, where it is necessary to contribute at least 2% of its gross product to the NATO budget, is not made by the overwhelming budget, first of all, by the same Germany, the largest economy in Europe, for example. And second, no less important, Trump was against a 100% vote on the decision to accept the candidate. This would just correspond to Ukraine's current demand to become a member of NATO. Therefore, I move on to the main thing. Does Zelenskyy know about all this? If so, why does he put Ukraine's desire to be a member of NATO as the first point? He has the right to do so. I return to the main thing. Ukraine today is an armored wall in front of these barbarians who today are aiming not just at Ukraine, but at the entire West, at democracy. That's the whole problem. Therefore, the Ukrainian people, who have lost thousands of their soldiers and are still losing their amazing generation of smart, beautiful, brave, young people, have the right to say today, listen, haven't we deserved it for more than 2.5 years? Well, at least to announce that Ukraine is already entering the process of accepting this great country into the family of NATO member countries. Moreover, this process is temporary, it is not instantaneous. This does not mean that today we declared Ukraine a member of NATO, got up in the morning, that's it, Ukraine became a member. No, the process is temporary, which covers such stages as the transfer of the defense industry of Ukraine to NATO standards. This is one. The adoption of laws that would correspond to the countries of democracy, for example, including the fight against corruption, for example, and much, much more, which, by the way, Ukraine has started. And under Zelenskyy, it has some certain successes. Suffice it to say that over the past 3 or 4 years, according to many world institutions, Ukraine has already moved 6 positions for the better in the list of countries that are evaluated by the degree of corruption. That is, Ukraine has improved its position, and this process continues despite the fact that the level of corruption in Ukraine is still high. And yet the war is going on. Against the backdrop of this war, you know, it is not so easy to fight corruption either. Although, we must admit frankly, there are a lot of sources who say that today the political system of Ukraine is so tied to the Russian special services that it is not so easy to identify, detect, destroy all this, and it is impossible to do this without the help of the West. That's impossible. Therefore, there must be priorities, and Zelenskyy is right 1,000 times when the next point is assistance to Ukraine. helping Ukraine all types of weapons that it can use to achieve victory. And this victory, I emphasize again, is a return to the borders of 1991. This is the help of the West, which Ukraine urgently needs today.
I would very much like the West to really help Ukraine win this war and reach the borders of 1991. But even if we talk about Ukraine's accession to NATO, then there is already a reaction from the United States of America, and they have once again stated that they do not intend to invite Ukraine to NATO. The situation at the moment is not conducive to inviting Ukraine to NATO, said Julian Smith, permanent representative to the alliance. Well, if we return to this plan of victory again, then many in the West allegedly consider it unrealistic. We have already heard all the points, and the answers from Western countries are such that they will not give us weapons, that is, permission to hit the territory of the Russian Federation with long-range weapons. Also, Ukraine will not join NATO. Well, that is, in fact, they are not very happy about what our president is proposing today.
Well, it was expected. I was not surprised at all, and not only me, very many. Why? Because the reaction, first of all, of the Biden administration, it corresponds to the policy that Biden is pursuing. And what kind of policy is this? The policy is that those American actions at the diplomatic and military levels, in the field, provided assistance to Ukraine with military equipment. This policy is based, as I put it, I quote Biden himself, so as not to escalate, not to provoke, not to push a non-nuclear power. And, my friends, let's be objective. As long as the Democrats are in power, there can be no talk of any victory for Ukraine. Even the same Harris, who at the debate together with Trump directly asked the journalist presenting whether you want Ukraine to win, did not answer. She did not answer directly. Yes, Trump did not answer either, but Trump has a strategy. He openly said that he is not going to show his cards today and he is doing the right thing. I can later explain why. And now Harris returns, as the one who today represents the Democratic Party, which sits in the White House, and she, it seems, as she hopes, already has a chance to change her vice presidential chair for the president's chair. She is constantly on her lips, yes, we will provide assistance to Ukraine. And she never said about providing assistance to Ukraine until its complete victory. This is very important. Therefore, I return to Zelensky's plan. It was not received with enthusiasm, with applause, it was not received. Why? And who? They are the ones who should perceive it. First of all, the administration of Biden and the media. The media, my friends, the left liberal media, 80% of them, sing along, trumpet and praise the Democratic Party. CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, NBC, BBC, whatever you want. I am already calling the BBC the British left liberal mouthpiece station, which has been trumpeting in favor of the Democrats for 24 hours. Therefore, all this taken together expressed its opinion not very enthusiastically and not very supportive of Ukraine, which in turn became doping for the drug addict Putin, who says, this is all a bluff, this is all nonsense, unrealizable and unrealistic. He is nodding his head towards the West, beating the West in the same way as those enemies of Ukraine who sleep and see Ukraine sitting down at the negotiating table today with the abandonment of Crimea in 4 areas, if not more.
те недруги Украины, которые спят и видят, что Украина уже сегодня села за стол переговоров с отказом Крыма, 4 областей, если не более.
Plus, playing along with Putin, officially declaring that we are a warrior in NATO, that you should never forget about NATO. Isn't all this oil to the fire that is raging today on the long-suffering Ukrainian land? What kind of victory or peace can we talk about? I have said and I will repeat again, my friends, if it suddenly happens that behind Ukraine's back, the Biden administration and Putin agree that it is necessary to implement a policy of peace in exchange for territories, that is, by forcing Zelenskyy to sit down at the negotiating table and accept it without asking the wishes of the Ukrainian people, then keep in mind, peace will be on paper, but it will never be on Ukrainian soil. The war will continue in other forms, at a different stage. The great people of Ukraine will show that they are still capable of fighting for themselves by other methods. It will also include partisan movements, from Vladivostok to Lvov, for example. It will include everything, absolutely everything. If to this day it is not possible to attack Moscow, then everything will be removed. Ukraine knows how to do this. Despite the fact that the West does not give what Ukraine needs, Ukraine itself is already the world leader in the development of drones and drones. According to our Washington Institute for the Study of War, the Ukrainians today have more than 2,000 developments of new types of drones that can fly up to 3,000 kilometers. In other words, they are quite enough to hit the Arbat, and Tverskaya, and the KGB building of Nadezhinskaya and many, many objects vital for Russia. This is what Ukraine can do simply thanks to humanity and, not wanting to irritate the same Biden and his entourage, the same Harris, Zelenskyy refrains from giving a command or order to attack Moscow. But if suddenly, I remind you again, suddenly, here, Washington decides to make such a deal with Putin, keep in mind, I think Zelenskyy should follow what Bibi Netanyahu is doing today. If Bibi Netanyahu had listened to Washington, today's Biden, then keep in mind that Israel would never have been able to destroy the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah, and would never have set foot on Gaza and, for example, in Lebanon. It is today that Zelenskyy needs to take a copy of Bibi Netanyahu's actions. Why? Because Zelenskyy expresses the thoughts and feelings of the Ukrainian people. Its popularity, according to the latest data, is 59%. This is quite popular. It means that the people believe in him. And he must continue to be as iron as, by the way, Trump called him, with delight. Stay the same. And the world, the peoples, and America, and Europe will appreciate it. To this day, Ukraine is popular with us. 62% of Americans, I always say this, according to the latest data, support strict assistance to Ukraine until its complete victory. And so it will be. Therefore, the victory plan, which was announced today by Zelenskyy, cannot be discounted. On the 17th 18th, literally tomorrow, Zelenskyy will be at the meeting as Minister of Foreign Affairs. 32 NATO member countries, Brussels. This is very interesting. There, Zelenskyy will officially acquaint all members with this victory plan. I am sure that we have begun our conversation about Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia. For example, his side, of course, will oppose it, and I am sure that the Hungarian side will also oppose it. Of that I have no doubt. And yet, Zelenskyy is right. The only way to wrest Ukraine within the borders of 91 from the clutches of the occupiers. This is the only way. And secondly, my friends, this is not just a war with Russia, this is a war with evil. Which includes Iran, and, of course, China, my friends. Do you think that by any chance China today simply confines itself to military exercises near Taiwan, not daring to attack? He is once again surprised that Russia has not been able to implement its plans to possess Ukraine. He is, of course, surprised by China's support, if not in full, but by the support that the West provides to Ukraine. This is one of the factors deterring China from aggression against Taiwan. This is thanks to the heroism of the Ukrainian people. Therefore, today the fate of Western civilization is being decided. To be or not to be the West at the level of well-being at which the West has been so far, there is obvious Russia, North Korea, Iran and fueled by China. Therefore, today, unfortunately, to our shame, the American people, the leadership of America does not show the qualities that should be inherent in the leader of the world community. This cowardice, this betrayal, I believe, is leading to the abyss of our own country. So today, with America's historic and landmark election just a few days away, and when voters are faced with the question of who to vote for the first time in my 35 years of living in this country, I find that international issues are also on the agenda of the average person.
Обнаруживаю, что в повестке дня обывателя впервые оказывается и вопросы международные.
That is, today the voter cannot ignore both the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel in the Middle East, which, I admit, can, according to the same Trump, escalate into a world war. This is quite possible. And it is also possible because if we continue to pursue such a concessionary policy as the Biden administration sees today, then, undoubtedly, sooner or later a world war may happen.
Если мы будем продолжать вести вот такую уступническую политику, какую ведет сегодня администрация Байдена, несомненно, рано или поздно мировая война может быть.
Why? Because if North Korea openly sends 10,000 today, tomorrow, they say, it will be 100,000 for the army. You know, Korean soldiers are already preparing to be sent to Russia. That is, the war is flaring up, my friends. Already the new country is openly beginning to be an accomplice. Why? Again, connivance, concession, cowardice. Only this can be called the victory of the West led by Biden.
Boris Yakovlevich, Zelenskyy said that according to this victory plan, which he presented, it would be possible to end the war no later than 2025. Of course, the elections in the United States are coming soon, and now we can say that Trump and Harris have equal chances. I wonder what the Trump company thinks about Zelenskyy's victory plan, because he also presented it to him, and then we heard such a statement from the possible US Vice President J.D. Vance. He proposed his plan to end the war, in which he said that Russia receives the captured territories, Ukraine receives guarantees of sovereignty, but does not join NATO and accepts neutrality, and Germany bears the main costs of restoring the economy of Ukraine. So what will Trump offer us?
Украина получает гарантии суверенитета, но не вступает в НАТО и принимает нейтралитет, а Германия берет на себя основные затраты по восстановлению экономики Украины. То тогда что же нам предложит Трамп?
First of all, I beg you, forget about Vance, let's not remember him. Why? First, Trump, when journalists asked him a question with reference to Vance's words, Trump directly said that he had never talked to him about these topics. Trump immediately distanced himself, the first thing. Second, let's rely more on Trump's words after meeting with Zelenskyy at his Trump Tower building in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue. Let's focus on the fact that Trump, coming out to reporters, right in the presence of Zelenskyy, said that he learned a lot about the war in Ukraine from Zelenskyy himself. It was his honest confession. Secondly, he called Zelenskyy iron. It was a wonderful compliment. This is firmness, steadfastness and lack of desire to concede in the protection of Ukraine's national interests. Trump said bluntly that he would make a decision that would not be to the detriment of Ukraine's interests. Let's stop there. Today we need to focus on Biden. Even if Trump wins, God grant that he wins, because he will become president as early as January 20th next year. Every day is precious, my friends. Today, Zelenskyy, having announced a victory plan, plans that if this plan begins to be implemented, then victory may be in the next few months. This is quite realistic. Why? Please. The most illustrative example is the amazing success in the Sioux of the Kursk region. Why don't we support it? Why don't we give Ukraine the opportunity to continue its strategy in this direction? Why don't we give Ukraine something that can protect Pokrovsk, which is very important? You know, here is an area that is not only of strategic importance, but also of military importance, because there are steel foundries there, which, you know, process and produce coke, one of the important elements of the old casting industry. Let me remind you that last year alone, Ukraine earned more than $2 billion from the sale of products of the old industry. And it is no coincidence that today Putin is seeking to capture Pokrovsk. This is so important. And why doesn't the West, knowing this, help Ukraine? After all, this is the territory of Ukraine, my friends. Well, what other words can you choose? Or slap him in the face.
Boris Yakovlevich, and you are telling us not to pay attention to Vance's words. But we do not hear any specifics from Trump himself, and there is not even a reaction to this victory plan that he discussed with Zelenskyy. That is, we do not know what he will actually do. And at the same time, not only Vance says some of his plans, but also the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress, Mike Johnson, he said that he no longer wants and allegedly they will not finance Ukraine. How should we perceive it?
Firstly, this is not true. He didn't say that. I don't know if these cases are being promoted now. He never said that, first of all. He will not say what he initiated the $61 billion aid to Ukraine, which was adopted on April 20th this year. He will never say what he approves of in providing offensive weapons to Ukraine. It was he who introduced a clause in the law adopted on April 20th, which states the provision of assistance to Ukraine by the nuclear actions of the Big Raj itself. It was both the idea and the initiative of himself.
But the Ukrainian delegation worked with him for a very long time. Do you remember when our deputies and our diplomats came to talk with Johnson about voting on this aid package?
Yes, that's right, friends. Listen, by and large, never forget that today we have elections. And not just an election, because neck and neck there is no chance that Trump will win. There is no chance that we Republicans will have a majority in the lower house, and there is no chance in the upper house. There is no guarantee, there is no big confidence, there is a large margin that would eliminate analytical error. No. Therefore, today you can hear anything you want from any iron. And there is no need to help Ukraine, and generally forget about Israel, peace with Iran, peace, for example, with China, Putin, Schmutton, whatever you want. By November 5th, we must win, my friends, we must win. You have to say whatever you want, to whomever you want, to the voter who has not yet decided. Let me remind you that we have at least 15 million voters who have not yet decided. They do not know who to vote for. And the overwhelming majority of them do not believe that Ukraine and Israel should be helped today. They are in 5th, 10th, 20th place. They say, let's solve the issues of inflation, illegal immigration, crime. So, in order not to lose them, not only does Trump not use or reveal his cards on what he will do when he becomes president, but also congressmen who are being re-elected. I will remind you, on November 5th, we have not only presidential elections, we have all 435 members of the lower house and congressmen re-elected, and 35 are 1/3 of the Senate. None of them is yet sure that he will call, no one goes neck and neck. There is a struggle for votes at all levels. Today, in order to achieve your goal, you need to use all the means that you have at hand. This is what American politicians have been using all their lives. It has been like this all the time. So don't get me wrong. Even if Trump says he will solve this issue, keep in mind, his philosophy is based on his expressions that he made at our party's convention on July 15th, when Trump was nominated for the Republican Party. And he said that he was for peace, but with a demonstration of force. He is for the world, which he will look at through the prism of our armed forces, the most powerful in the world. And he will demonstrate it. These are his words. And just a couple of days ago, again, journalists put him against the wall and said, "Tell me, how will you solve the issues of the war in Ukraine and in Israel?" And that's it. I believe that he is right. He is right, because there is no guarantee that he will win. We want those 15 million to come and vote for Trump. But when he wins, he will have nothing to lose, my friends. He will take off his gloves. And I am sure that he will never act with the interests of Ukraine. Not a single fifth of the land of Ukraine will be given away. Remember, even if he offers it to Zelenskyy, Zelenskyy will not accept it. Why? Because Zelenskyy is the people. Zelenskyy cannot go against his people. Never. That's it. That's it.
Scholz announced her readiness to negotiate with Putin on the war in Ukraine. Let me remind you that earlier there were rumors that the Chancellor planned to call Putin, but the German government later said that Putin was not ready to discuss the war in Ukraine with Scholz. Boris Yakovlevich, what do you think, if such conversations, rumors, materials that Scholz will talk to Putin do appear again, is it really possible now, as if they have found someone with whom Russia is still ready to talk about something on behalf of the face of the West, will Scholz be?
Well, Germany is the very most infected with the virus of Putinism, starting with Schröder. Schröderization, it still exists, my friends, of course. Do you think it is by chance that today the party is gaining momentum as an alternative to Germany? This is no coincidence. And Scholz, of course, having said this, addressed the press with his domestic audience. This is first of all. On the other hand, he wanted to play along with the rising tide in the West today. Not only France, Italy, even, for example. I'm not talking about Hungary or Slovakia, but we have a growing wave in America as well, the one that we have talked about more than once on our airwaves, the concessionist, conciliatory, socialist wave, the same wave that Harris will be preserved. They will definitely make a deal with Putin to stop the war, to make peace and promise carrots. You know, here, for Zelenskyy, carrots that are never realized. For example, that carrot, I mean, is NATO membership. Therefore, you know, this Scholz, he speaks to this wave. This is the whole problem. This is the most dangerous phenomenon today. This wave of concession and conciliation is rising again. And with far-reaching consequences, I spoke even in our meeting with you on this channel, we are talking not only about Ukraine. The point is that if concessions are made to Putin here, on Ukrainian soil, it means that we recognize our weakness in front of China, which can deal with Taiwan in no time, and, of course, Iran. That's the worst thing. The same Iran, which literally any day can become the owner of nuclear weapons, then Putin's threats will turn out to be flowers for us. Why? Because if Putin is still badly and poorly engaged in bravado, promising to use nuclear weapons and not using them, nevertheless realizing that there will be a threat to him personally, the Ayatollahs do not have such an instinct. God forbid that if they acquire nuclear weapons, they are ready, you know, to return the entire globe to a nuclear catastrophe, believing that they, the Shaheeds, will be received with Allah's embrace, because they will sacrifice themselves for the destruction of their enemies. This is the philosophy of radical Islam today. And the Ayatollahs are on top of this extraterrorism. Therefore, God forbid, if this happens, Biden should understand this. This is not the case. This is what alarms and frightens us all, with all the ensuing consequences.
Boris Yakovlevich, do you have any positive news? Any insiders?
Of course, there is. Do you think that the friends of the Ukrainians are sitting idly by here? Of course not. I also know that the leader of the Democratic minority, Jeffries, a great friend of Ukraine and a great friend of Israel, together with Johnson, our Republican Speaker, are working to put pressure on the executive branch by all available means, so that Biden still gives the go-ahead to help Ukraine with the types of equipment that Ukraine needs today. There are cases that something comes behind the scenes. We will know if this is true, for example, from the news from the front lines. God willing, very soon we will know if this is so. I think that's probably the case. There is another interesting news in the fact that today this desire of North Korea to supply manpower is growing, by the way, and I have already recalled that there are cases when up to 100,000 Koreans will be sent to the front line with Ukraine in the near future. This is the extent to which the level of war or North Korea's involvement in the war in Ukraine can reach. For example, in response to this, we again return to the issue of adopting a law allowing our volunteers to take part in the war in Ukraine. First of all, we are talking about the pilots. This is the most important thing, the very pilots who can finally take part in the war in Ukraine on F-16 aircraft, of which there are about a dozen today. Here is the aircraft aviation, for example, the one that was initiated by Belgium, the Netherlands and Sweden. It must finally send what it promised. There should be something like 100 planes there. Not to mention the fact that aircraft should also be supplied from other NATO member countries, the same ones that are replacing the fourth generation of aircraft, 16 with F-35 aircraft. This is also the case. Therefore, I think that today we are already having a campaign to help Ukraine with volunteers, and on a legal basis. In the near future, I think, we will also continue to lobby in the ways that we are endowed with, campaigning, appeals, letters, personal meetings and financial injections into their election campaigns. All this taken together, I think, should play a certain role. Moreover, as I said, there is bipartisan unity in Congress to provide assistance to Ukraine until its complete victory. I have already named the leaders of the lower house, and the same is true of the upper house. Lindsey Graham, a great friend of Ukraine, a Republican, and Blue Mental, a senator, is also a Democrat and a great friend of Ukraine. Here they are already in the Senate. In other words, there are forces that help Ukraine and will never refuse to help Ukraine until it is completely defeated. This is our hope.
And what is the further fate of long-range weapons and the ability to hit military facilities on the territory of Russia with them?
A very difficult question. Again, it all comes down to the desire of one person. This is Biden. Only him. Not only does it not allow the supply of long-range, large-scale American weapons, but it also does not allow the leaders of European countries to do so. Why? Because even the same Storm Shadow are well-known British large-scale radio missiles. They are created using American components. Therefore, there is such a condition that no country has the right to supply weapons, even of its own production, if they used American-made components. You need to get permission from the Americans. This is what Biden uses and does not allow. The same Leopards do not go in the required numbers, for example, Taurus, for example, the same, missiles cannot arrive, American elements are used there. This is the whole problem. Therefore, unfortunately, there is no answer to this question yet. To what extent this is possible will depend on how active our legislators are on the same bipartisan basis. They must set conditions for Biden. If he wants America to keep its name as a leader, and for America to be trusted and trusted, America must live up to its responsibilities. This is the supply of weapons to Ukraine, which Ukraine needs for its complete victory. This is our principle, our position. In any case, the Republicans.
Boris Yakovlevich, thank you very much for finding time for our broadcast. Thank you for this conversation. And I will remind the audience that Boris Pincus was in touch with us. Friends, do not forget to put your like, be sure to write a comment from which country, from which city you are watching us. Share this video so that as many people as possible can see it. Thank you all for your attention, good news, take care of yourself and see you.
Thank you very much. Very difficult times, we are going through with you, very much, but I believe in justice. We will win, we will win. The truth is ours. We have no other choice. We will win for sure and very soon. Thank you.